Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are watching from. My name is Tobi Oseni, and I'm your host for today. And today we are going to be talking about solving a world problem with Azure Data Factory. And our facilitator for today is going to be Mr. Tobi Kazeem. Okay. Mr. Tobi Kazeem is a skilled and experienced business intelligence solutions developer on the Microsoft Data Platform with extensive solution development and deployment in financial, investment, supply chain, human resources, sale, marketing, procurement, manufacturing. He's also a Microsoft certified data analyst and a data engineer, and he earned those certificates at the early stages of his certificates. Like when the certificates were in the early stages, that's when he earned this Microsoft certificates. He's passionate about business growth, people performance, and processes with the aim of adding value to an organization through intelligence and from data and strategic decision making. He's currently working on the development of a standard financial report solution for generating financial reports in Power BI from a few clicks and little user actions. Now I'm going to hand over to the speaker. Please get your jotters and your system ready so you can follow step by step as he's taking us. Do have a wonderful time.
Okay. Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon once again. As introduced earlier, I'll try to solve basic problem with EDF. As we know, uh, EDF is actually a little recap. Is actually a managed serverless data integration services, which means that we can use it to copy and transform data. Uh, it's actually made basically used for managing batch data integration or data workload, low code, and it has it's a compute service. So today we'll be creating. I think the last time we met, we talked more theoretical, and everything that's related to data factory. So I think today we'll move more practical, and we'll try to lay our hands on a lot of examples. So, but these are expectation. We create an Azure data factory, create a storage account, create a pipeline. We set and configure a GitHub repo with ADF and load some multiple CSV file to Azure SQL table. I'm trying to set up SQL server also so that we can see, but we'll try to limit it basic in the space of time. So let's go to the Azure portal, not to waste our time. Let's go to the Azure portal, not to waste your time. Okay. So here on my Azure portal here, let me start again. Okay. So here on my Azure portal, so every services is actually considered as a resources, and I believe we have known that. So and the resources can be logically connected through a resource group. So we'll try to create an Azure data factory. So creating an Azure data factory, the last time we spoke, we actually know that creating an Azure data factory, we're creating an instance of Azure data factory, which we can access through a studio, which is an online studio. It's not like SSMS we have on-prem. So I can come here, or this is my Azure portal, this is my tenant, and I can come here and press on create. So I can decide to go to the marketplace. So I'm currently on a particular um, resource group, on a particular resource group. And I'm currently on MW ADF Dev resource group. So I can actually come to this place, look for or create either create resources or look for data studio, something related to data studio, or I can use so okay I'm on okay let me use create resources. Let me use create resources here. So I can use integration or analytics. So I can come to analytics and then um sometime okay so integration here. So I can come to integration and create data factory. So it's the best way is to click on create resources, integration, and move to data factory. So doing that, you can select your resource group. So I can decide to select this particular resource group. I can give my ADF like Niger, or let's say NJ ADF demo and you can know more about the name of the ADF. Maybe is globally accepted. So checking region, I know we have done a lot of Azure class, not to talk about that. So we can pick where I prefer West Europe, and this is very very key. This is very very key, and thank God there is no even version one again. So it's better you pick version two. So we have that, so I can quickly review and create. I can quickly review and create the ADF. So okay, my GitHub, uh, I'll configure this later. It's always good advisable to configure it later, though it's actually mandatory, but we can also configure it here, trying to check for GitHub account, so which we'll try to also we also do. So but let's try to configure it later. I'll review and create. So that's our first step. So and then we can create our ADFs. So it's just straightforward. It's a click of a button, as we know Azure Data Factory. So while the deployment is ongoing, let's talk about some things around the work example. Okay, resources is done. So I can go to resources, and then while going to the resources, you can actually see uh, the studio, which we mentioned about that. The studio is where you can author and monitor your data pipeline with your data flow. So we also know that, I think the first class we introduced us to data flow also. So and then you can read more on some documentation. So I can quickly bring up the studio. I can quickly bring up the studio. I can quickly bring up the studio. So what we have created so far, we have created Azure Data Factory. So we have created Azure Data Factory. So we can decide. Let me expand this. Manage. So we can now decide to come to configure give, because Azure Data Factory does not have a storage of its own. So it's always good. Let me try to go to my GitHub login. It's always good to configure a version control where you can actually manage your Azure Data Factory, where you can store your data. So you can I prefer doing it later, as I showed earlier. So let's try to do give git configure. So connect your workspace with your git repository just with a few clicks. And this is very important because while working, you might need to you might need to you might need to store your data, to have a version of what you are working on. And because mandatory, we should also understand that Azure Data Factory is more of a compose services. It does not have a storage of its own. So, and anything might happen while you are working. Maybe there is it's always good to back up with a version control, a source control, so that not only for you, also for your colleague, the way you can store the code behind the scene you're working on. So I can pick up GitHub. So I can look for the Git repository owner. So for example, I can pick up my GitHub account. Let me pick up my GitHub account. Just there. Okay. So let me try to pick this up. So continue. So it will actually ask me. Um, so it will actually ask me which of these is true down. So authorize Azure Data Factory. Good. Good. Mm. Oh, let me try that again. Sure. Okay, just a little. Let me try that again. Okay, let me use my name. Okay. So let me select my repository. So you can actually use your username directly. So I thought I were using my URL. So you can just pick your username, which is also good. So this is my username on GitHub. So it is not necessary you put your URL. Sometimes it goes that way, but just put in your normal name so I can see all my repo. So you can see all my repo here. So let me decide to dump it somewhere. So configure it to one of these repository. So let me pick this. So loading. So I can see that and configure other things. Maybe collaboration branch. I can decide to use my master branch. Publish branch should be ADF publish. So if there's other things you want to put in, so import existing resources to repo. So import resources into this branch. You can actually pick up the master branch, but if you want to create another branch, it's okay. So and then you can apply. So this step is very mandatory when we are working with ADF. So we can actually skip this step because we should all believe that ADF does not have a storage of its own. It's always good to use a source control to manage our codes and to manage our pipeline. So I think that's good. That's good for now. So that's good. We have done the first step. So let's talk about a scenario. Um, there's different scenarios in real world I can actually use ADN. So we talked about some. For example, in an insurance complaint, I'm sorry, I should have more slide, more pictorial slide, but I think I just part of it for today. Excuse me. So, uh, for example, most of us owns a car, and most of us run insurance, and you believe me, if you have issue with claims department, there's some document the customer need to fill send to them. So one of the solution we have encountered is these documents need to be uploaded and need to be copied from one folder to the other, so that there should be approval and move to be archived when the claim is actually resolved. So these are one of the examples using Azure Data Factory, trying to check when a new file or a file have been updated. For example, you as a customer, when you are talking about claims, maybe your car had an accident or something happened, you want to claim, there's some certificates, there's some forms you fill which you can't even upload, which you can't even fill as a form on a portal. It's like a what is like a text file, like a PDF file. The customer need to fill, sign, and send back to the insurance person. So why all this form comes out, there's in some industry, there's some Azure Data Factory job that we can run to check when a new file has been uploaded. That's a scenario. We also have scenarios like you trying to you we have scenarios something like a new company coming from Germany, which is trying to establish in Nigeria. The company is actually using Business Central, but the new company, they're trying to work on a complementary product. Let's say, for example, butter, bread and butter. So the company from Nigeria, from Germany, do sell bread, but there's a Nigerian company selling butter. um the Nigerian company selling butter, instead of the German company is not interested in building, setting up infrastructure, so they are interested to use the their partners, their Nigerian partners infrastructure here. So what the company is actually using two different enterprise resource planning. The company is using, one is using like Business Central, another is using a third party or a legacy system. So we can call an API to get data from the legacy one and push through Azure Data Factory daily to the SQL database of the company from Germany. So a lot of scenarios. So far, you have it's involved data integration and things like that. You you can actually work out Azure Data Factory. So let's do some activities here. So um, the easiest one we can actually do is more related to a copy activity, and we'll try to set up a copy activity, which is try to copy data from one folder to the other. Of a scenario I work with this week was like, we are running a training and the students are submitting assignment on one folder, and automatically when the assignment is submitted in a folder, it's moved to another folder where the admin or the teacher alone can only view it. So that's another case of it. So let's create a copy activity. So for example, a copy activity is just straightforward. It's just to copy data from one folder to another and delete the old one. So immediately the students submit the file will be moved to another folder where the admin only have access to, and the student cannot access the file again, and he can't even submit again. So let's walk through that. Let's create a storage account, which is also mandatory. So let's create a storage account, create resources. So let's create a storage account. So this is a storage account. Hope I'm still audible, please. Okay. So MW dev region. So I pick my so I can actually put Niger ADF storage account. Let me put SC. Oh, sorry, I do forget. Storage account does not accept any special character, so you need to use the word letter throughout. So West Europe. So I can pick up standard. Why storage account? Storage account is where you can Storage account give you flexibility to have files, folders, and things like that. So I can reduce this to local redundancy, not to waste a lot of our time. I can quickly do view immediately and create. So that's the first thing. So we move to Azure Data Factory proper. Move to Azure Data Factory proper. Okay, deployment is on the way. Okay, so let me go. Let me go to my resources. Okay, okay. So, here is my resources here. So, um, I can decide. So in Azure Data in storage account, I can decide to create a container or whatever. I can decide to create a container. So this one of the storage account created from Azure. So you can use a Azure Storage Explorer to view it, and then so major thing I want to do here is to create a container. So create a container. So just a little. Create a container. So I can create a container here. So a container is where you store your like a folder, or let's say just is more of like a database. A container is more of like a database. So we can call it source. Let's just say source, and it can be private access, so no anonymous access. But if something like for the scenario like a claim where you need to expose it to almost everybody, you can try to change the access to. So but let's just create and move on. Move on. Okay, so we are good. We are good now. So we can upload this since we have a source account. So since we have a source container, so let's go to Azure Data Factory. So we can decide to create a new pipeline. We can go through a pipeline, or we can start from ingest or copy data activity. So let's try to start from a pipeline. So yeah, so what a pipeline? Pipeline is where you combine activities together. So pipeline consists of one more activity. So activity, what do you mean by activity? Actions. So for example, get metadata. Maybe you have a file running in a folder, you want to get the metadata. That is an action. So these are activities line up here. So when you have more than one, when you have one or more, it can be regarded as a pipeline. And for people that have done SSIS, it's more like you are creating an SSIS packages. So trying to bundle all your code in one place. So I can decide to rename PL. Let me rename this PL Niger PDF demo. So you can rename it. I always prefer to do PL first so that it can be easily identified. So under the move and transform, because it's actually more on move and transform. So I can bring up copy data activity. So just some warnings there from a lot of things are changing on Azure, so you can be warned. So so what do you want to do? So for example, I can name this. You can name this copy data, copy sorry copy data. Then just seamless. You can give a description. So source and sync, where we talk about Azure Data Factory is actually for batch processing. So where is the data coming from? So our data is coming from a folder, Azure Block Storage. So we can decide to select, is it new? So what the first thing we need to create is a data set. I think I have a diagram. I don't know. The data set is a schema, is a shape of your real storage where the data is. So the data set in particular here is talking about the shape. So you need to create the shape. So like you are creating a schema. So we can decide to create new. Our data set is coming from Azure, Azure Block Storage. Azure Block Storage. We can decide to create new, continue. So what type of data set it is? Let's say it is a delimited text. Let's say it is a delimited text. You can have a lot of JSON, Afro, which is more of row base. But let's just use a delimiter text, which is like a CSV. So we can name the data set BS underscores Niger ADF demo, and then so link services is like your SQL server credentials. If you are connecting to an SQL server credentials, I can create a new link services. So I can create a new link services. This is the ADF. I can decide to pick my, because I'm using Azure Block Storage, I can decide to pick which one of these. This one is the one I selected, I created now. So Niger ADF SC with Niger Azure Data Factory storage account. So connection. So I can text the connection, which is okay. Okay, if it is okay. So the connection is actually successful. So we have that. So what we have done so far. We have created um, our link services and our data set. So we have created our link services and our data set. So let me just let's wait for that. Good. So that is good. So we can now put the parts the file that we are trying to move. We can put the file that we are trying to move. So for example, so we didn't really have in our essay, we call it source. So I can just copy the name. So source, okay, they are all lowercase. So container is like a database. So if you have like a directory in your container, you can put the directory here. But since I don't have a directory, I can I can put the file name, but I didn't have a file currently. So I can say no and click just to create the connection down. So and click OK. So I can decide to pick, if there's file there, I can decide to pick that too. Can decide to pick that too. So we have set up the connection now. So we can move forward. And since we want to use a wildcard, we are interested to use a wildcard file path. So like people that have done programming, when you say a wildcard, like a regex, any file that end with this, or any file that like a regular expression, any file that start with a particular word. So wildcard file path. So I can decide to pick this and say anything that end with a text file. Anything that end with a text file. anything that end with a text file. So the job you actually go through the folder and pick anything that end with a text file, and pick anything that ends with a text file. Okay, so good. So we can decide to go that route. Pick anything that ends with a text file. So um then we have this down. So we can because immediately for the scenario I'm working on, a scenario where imagine you are working, you are doing a learning hub regular for the one I have recently, which just this week, organizing some training, and then students do submit some assignment daily. And though it was actually executed with Power Automate in Teams, but because we have the students in now, so by eventually you are getting file from different location. So the student, once immediately the student drop their assessment at the end of the day, immediately it is being picked up and moved to another folder, and it is being deleted. So we want to create the second part of it, which is like a delete job. So which is like a delete job. Though I didn't put any file there, but once you have a file there, once we run that, it will actually uh execute. So the next part is to create a delete activities. So is to create a delete activities. So let's go into that one. Sorry. So let me check for delete. So immediately the file is being picked, it is being deleted so that the student will not have access to it anymore. This is a scenario I worked on just recently this week, based on request. So it's the student will not have any access to it anymore. So you can go you can go through the delete. You say delete data, delete data. So once you go through that, so source, where is it coming from? It's coming from this data set that we created. So the schema, it will actually mirror the schema. Um, any file that is test file, if you want to use um if you want to use, you can just say dot asterisk, which is like a regular expression, dot tst file, and then you can just uh, execute that. If you have other login settings, let's see, for example, so we have already done that, and if we run this job like debug, let me save all. I'm saving. So that's the essence of doing Git, because ADF does not have any storage device. So immediately I save this, it goes to that GitHub repository, and I can come back and restore my code from that GitHub repository. So I can do debug, um, pipeline validation is required, copy data activities is required. So there's some things. Hold on. So I can validate my query and debug, because there is no data currently. Uh, there's no data currently on my data on my pipeline, so we can decide to put a data also. So that's a case scenario. Work Hold on. So working with Azure Data Factory. So that's a particular case scenario working with Azure Data Factory. So I think scenario one, though is so basic, but as basic as it is, it can solve a lot of problems, like a school or a training program where your student are submitting file every day, and you don't want them to access it anymore. So, and from here we can create another job to go to the next folder. So I hope that's also work for us. So also, there's a lot of activities we can run when it comes to Azure Data Factory. So let's move to the next one. Excuse me. Okay. Can you hear me? So, for example, when we have scenarios where different sales, another scenario is where different. So we just we try to talk about all this class, all this word example, basically. Another scenario you can have is where in a budget, most of our accounting, the way the budget is being provision is different. So they create the budget yearly. So maybe you have already instructed each department. For example, now as we are planning for a new year, each department uh, submit their budget. So you can decide to, and there will be multiple file, and then you need to bring all these files together. And you have a lot of company, multinational companies, and the IT need to stay all this thing in one place. So we can decide to give them a folder, move this multiple CSV file to Azure SQL table. So, I have this kind of scenario in a risk environment also, which we in a risk environment. One of the requirements is when a particular complaint is not as easy to compute a risk module on an enterprise resources planning. So, for example, the one I have here on my screen, this is an example when you try to do compliance method, you need to send a lot of questionnaires. So how stressful you building a system for this. So you set up a questionnaires to each department, trying to build a risk matrix, a 5 by 5 risk matrix. So different departments comes out with their risks, because the peculiarity about this is this particular the risk for strategy department and for finance department is actually different. So it's actually difficult. It's actually difficult to build a full SQL different formats. The data is not as it is, and the end goal is to build. The end goal is actually to build something more of an the end goal is to build something more of an risk by 5 metrics, which you need to get data, the analysts need to get data from. So these are one of the real world problem to work on with Azure Data Factory. So let's try to do something related to that also. Just a minute. Okay, so let me create another pipeline. So you can create as many pipeline you want. So let me create a new pipeline. So create another pipeline. Oh, serious? I'm just saying, wow. Sorry, I just realized the time is actually against us. So let me just do a simple one, just like if a particular file exists, because I just realized it's 4:43 now, and then in the next 7 minutes we'll be entertaining questions. So let me bring a simple example again, because this might actually take a longer time to do. So the next one is maybe maybe okay, it's also almost the same way, it's part of it. So I'll just do this part of it. For example, when you want to check if a particular file exists, you want to check if a particular file exists in in a particular folder. Let's say for example, for those submitting file for the budgeting, you want to check, let me use the same, you want to check if those file is already there. So for example, let's look for a get metadata. So you can get metadata, a get metadata option, and then if an if condition, option. So settings, you can set up and get metadata about a particular file and check if that file exists. So let me just call this, sorry, pl2 pl2. So what I want to do is I want to get metadata about a particular file, and I want to know if the file exists, because I'm expecting the file from, because sometimes when someone send us a file in a folder, you might not know, there's no notification, and after this there will be a notification sent to me. So I can decide to check this. So file, then so once I can connect this here, and then look for variables. So my expression can be get activity get metadata output dot exist, so is equal to true. So it's like you writing, these are basic coming. So it's actually more of, okay, I think just straightforward. So you can, so once I get metadata for this file, I can determine if it exists or not, and then I can send. It also take a huge time. I can send an email. We can set up an email when there's a check about this particular file if it exists or not. So we can send an email about this particular file if it actually exists or not. So there's some metadata I can get from there depending on how I want to set them. No, let me just rename it. So I can get some variable. Let's say test, and then I want to know if it's actually, let's say, um, budget So I want to know if the budget dot tsv. So if that exists, yeah, okay. Okay, so I've changed the name. So these are another things you need to be very careful. The name have been changed, so I need to change that to, yeah. I think I mistakenly I changed the name, and I didn't update my repository, my convention. So with this, if once we do some setup here, though we might not be able to go through in depth, but I'll try. You once the file exists, if it is true, you set up a true condition, and then the next one you can create a web loop, maybe to logic app. um let's say I'll try just to do a template of what we can do. Let's say a web loop or through, okay, I think that has dropped, where you can send a mail to a mail, and then we can set up some other things here, and then through HTTP we can set up URL and other thing, get some information and send mail. So this is another word example that we can actually do. So I think I will draw the curtain for more questions. Though there's a lot we can do, there's a lot of what scenario we can actually do with ADF. Is not limited depending on case study as we meet daily. But I will advise us to always go through documentations and other things. So though we didn't cover more data flow is another part of solving. Is almost the same thing like data flow in Power Query. You can do incremental loading. You can do scenarios where for the risk department where you need to store their risk information into different tables. That also can be done. There's thousands of scenario which we can talk about, but the major thing is to show us that Azure Data Factory can solve a lot of problem when related to batch workloading. So I will give room to questions at this time because our time is fast spent. Time is just fast spent that before you know the time is gone. So I will draw the curtain now. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Can anybody hear me? Okay. If you have any question, I would love to. Maybe generally, maybe you have some what problem that you think ADF can solve, or you want us to discuss it. Though we'll have gone more practical, but just pardon me for today. Okay. So I will entertain any question at this time. If you have any question regarding to what we have discussed, we have looked into two scenario, thousands. There is a lot, thousands of scenario that can be done. It's not limited to this. There is thousands of scenario that we can go through. You can read from an old data file. You can even check on date time when a particular you can do a schedule file when a particular file is being modified or something, then you try to push it forward. The scenario is not limited. Incremental loading is one of the things I love. You can merge multiple CSV file into single CSV file using copy activities also with the same column in a. So far they have the same column. It's not like normal merging in Power Query. So, but Azure Data Factory in a large scales help out for enterprise batch workload. So and it's seamless, and we have seen major thing. We have seen how to configure our GitHub to it, and it's very very mandatory. That's one of the best things to take away from this session. So can you hear me? Okay. Okay, so I think that's what I have for us today. Next time we'll do more better if there is no question from the audience. So, but we have been able to demonstrate some scenarios to us. So I think the moderator can take it over at this point.
That was a wonderful session. Please, if you have questions, kindly drop them in our comment section so we can treat them as soon as possible. Any questions at all? Questions. So this will bring our series to an end. Kindly keep practicing. Make sure you're always working with data so you can build yourself slowly because they say practice makes perfect. And if you want to be good in this, you need to practice constantly. And that way we will all become perfect. Hope to see you soon. Have a lovely weekend, everyone.
Thanks.